everybody. It's me, Ask a Witch, Brita, and I just wanted to say hello again. Those of you who have logged back in to do this again, and really, appreciate your following my broadcasts. I have a lot of things laid out today that I'm ready to share with you. And our internet connection is a little bit strange today. So if it cuts out for a moment, it's because of that. We live very rurally, and so the internet in rural Washington is not the best. So anyway, I am sitting here with some fabulous incense and lots of, great things that I want to talk about. But before I talk about any of that, I want to ask if there's any questions from last week on, protection and smudging and that sort of stuff, if anybody has any questions. And certainly, there'll be a couple of opportunities to ask questions during the broadcast. So if you have questions that crop up, just write them down, and when I get a pause or whatever, or, if I see them come up on the screen, I'll address them at that time. So, let me talk about, before I talk about, there's a question. When you are smudging, is there anything that you should be saying? Well, it depends on the tradition you follow, but not necessarily. I don't generally say anything when I'm smudging. What I generally do is I just take that smudge stick and wave it around until the whole house is saturated with that smoke. And, that usually, I feel like that really clears out any negative stuff that might be in my house, that sort of thing. But I don't usually say anything, although I do know that the tradition generally comes from Native American cultures, and I'm sure that they have things that they say. I don't, as a person who very much appreciates Native American culture and sees, the incredible connection to the earth that the religions have, which is very like paganism, there's still, some pretty big differences. I would say that shamanic Wicca probably included some kind of prayer or some kind of thing that was said around smudging, but it's been lost in time as far as I know. So, hey, so I see Carrie, and I see Jack, and I see Jennifer. So, let me move this thing here. And Gail, hi. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit first before I go into what goes on an altar. I'm going to talk a little bit about what an altar is for. So I'm not sure everyone is clear on that. And there are lots of different ways to describe it. I will say that as an anthropologist, I've seen altars really in every culture I've ever visited. I don't know if altar building or altar use is universal, but I suspect that it is. And the reason I do is because a lot of the same kinds of magic is done from culture to culture. We have different things we use. We might use a knife in one culture and a stick in another and a rock in another, but it doesn't really matter because the underlying beliefs, the underlying format tends to go in the same direction. So I wrote some notes just so I can stay on track. First I wanted to talk about what an altar is. So an altar to me, and from what I understand from my studies in anthropology, is a place to leave an offering. It's a place to connect with divinity. It's a place to connect with the gods. And because of that, it also is a sacred space and a protected space, a space where you can do divination, a space where you can do magic, a space where you can, safely connect with the supernatural without having to worry. Also, it's a good desk for doing spells. It's a good place for any kind of energy moving. And that being said, I can tell you that the things that are on your altar can vary depending upon what tradition you follow and also what you believe. For me, it's a lot about, I don't know, I kind of think of it as sort of like a pagan feng shui, I guess. it's a funny way of looking at it, I guess, but the way that I feel about it is what's on my altar needs to connect me with divinity, needs to be the things that I would use for any kind of working I would be doing, needs to bring in the energy that I'm hoping to connect with. And so, therefore, there's going to be a lot of different things. Now, I know that some of the pagan authors, like Raymond Buckland, who we also call Uncle Buck around here, Raymond had very specific sort of a British traditional sort of way of setting up the altar where you have your candles just so and certain colors and certain layout and all that sort of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people practice very formula type magic, and that's totally fine. Whatever moves your psyche, whatever moves your spirit, whatever moves you, that's what you should, have on your altar. For me, I would say I started out with some of that traditional stuff, and it was fun for a while. But what I find is most powerful on my altar is the things that mean the most to me and the things that connect me with Goddess and God. So starting with that, I usually have symbols of, divine feminine and divine masculine. For example, I have this fabulous little horn that I keep on my altar, and it represents that spring masculinity, that young stag sort of energy that I really enjoy. I'm not such a young goddess anymore, but I still love that spring energy that comes through, that in the spring, when everything's blooming, and that whole satyr kind of energy, and this represents that for me. I also have things that represent femininity too, like I have this little painted egg, and I really like it because it reminds me of the wonder of hatching. Hatching is a new life, and it's a new beginning from something very compacted, this is like a seed, things that come out of it. You plant a seed in the ground and a whole tree comes out. That to me is a really magical thing. Life is incredibly magical, and this reminds me of that. And then I also often have symbols of goddess and god too. Like, for example, I brought out this tiny little statue of Kali Ma, who I dearly love. She's one of my favorites. Not because she's so scary, because she can be scary, but she's not really, if you know her. She deserves respect, certainly. But she is more, I would say, her first thing that she is mother. She is mother. Kali Ma is a mother. And she, the stories of her have her, protecting children, protecting babies, and slaying demons while protecting babies. So what a crazy, awesome goddess is that? So I have her actually all over my house. And boy, you call her, if you ever have a problem with something, and you call her, she just kind of comes right in, and straightens it out. So I have her on my altar a lot. And then I also have Ganesh. Ganesh is pretty wonderful. Now, I know that Kali and Ganesh are not from Wiccan tradition. I do have statues, that are from all kinds of traditions. You can see behind my head here, I've, statue of Diana, and Artemis is all over my house. And I've got, Freya up on my altar over there. Let me just say, any flat surface becomes an altar after a while, especially after you start accumulating lots of things. But Ganesh is a door opener. He's the guy who opens the door and says, hey, come on in and let me show you what opportunities or options you have. And so I like to have him too. I don't have him on the altar all the time, nor do I have Kali on the altar all the time. I move and swap out gods and goddesses to get whatever kind of energetic presence that I need for the working that I'm doing. So I have these guys often on the altar as well. And there are some other things too, like I love this little thing. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a beautifully etched little dish that I found in a little shop in Santa Cruz that was called 13. I don't know if it's still there. But it has, Cupid on it. It's got little sort of love god and goddess, Eros. And the whole goddess god dynamic, and also androgyny and all those things. I just love this little piece, so I use that. Hang on just a moment. Alrighty. Sorry about that. My family came home a little earlier than they were supposed to, and so they're noisy. So I had to shut the door. I also have things that represent the elements. I think it's really important to represent all the elements on your altar. So the tools also have representation of the elements. One of the reasons why they're on the altar. And if you have a chance to read Raymond Buckland's book, The Blue Book, Jack, yes, it's a fabulous book. It has lots of great information in it. It will tell you like some of the rules about tools and how to make some of them and how to bless them and how to cleanse them and all those kind of things. And it's a great book to kind of begin things with. So on my altar here, I have some representations of the different elements. I have this little chalice, and I've been, doing this for so long, as you know, that I have like 6 or 7 of these, and it really depends on what I'm doing. I like this one for spring because it's kind of reminds me of a maiden. It has a very maidenly sort of feel and look to it. So this one is my chalice, and it represents water. It also represents the well of the goddess, or even could say it represents her yoni. So there's definitely that aspect. Or a bowl of water. I actually got this idea from my friend Bonnie. The bowl of water, the idea of filling the bowl, and as you're filling the bowl of water, you're thinking of all the things you're grateful for until your bowl is overflowing. And every time you look at it, it reminds you all of all the things you have to be grateful for. So it's a wonderful tradition, and I always have this on my altar too because it reminds me of Bonnie. It also reminds me of water, and it reminds me to be grateful. Okay, so water is usually represented by something that will hold water, or, a chalice or a bowl or something like that. I also have things on my altar that represent water that are not holders of water. Like I have these little seashells, and I got these little seashells on the seashore of Scotland when I was there for my honeymoon with my husband, and I just love them because they just feel like the seashore of Scotland, which is very, very magical. I really have a strong connection there. My ancestry is there, strong ancestry there. And these seashells remind me not only of the trip and the time that I spent with Leslie there, who is a dear magical friend who lives there, but also they remind me of the wildness of the ocean and the gift that the ocean is and the things that it gives, like wisdom and ancient fossils and all kinds of fun things like that. And certainly there's a lot that comes up from that well that's important. For air, I usually have something like a wand. So I have this fabulous little fairy wand. This was made at a camp. My friend Jessica Bowman does the Gaia art camp, magical camp, and I help with that, and it's really wonderful, and I feel so honored, that I get to be there and be a teacher. And one of the students there, teachers, also made different things and taught us about different magical art and ways to, do artist prayer and that sort of thing. And this was a fairy wand, and the idea was, magic and fun. Fun was a big part of it. So having a wand that's fun is a nice thing, because whenever I look at it, I think, oh, that's fun, and it's very positive. It's this representation of air. Now, some people switch the air and the fire to this being fire, the wand being fire, and the sword, or the athame, this was made for me by a very magical man. This as being air. And I don't know, I really feel like the wand has that air energy. It just feels like that to me. It doesn't make me right. It just means I'm following my own instincts on how that all works. So, and so I have a question from Brianna. Do you put all the objects relating to the elements on the altar, or just one at a time for simplicity? It depends on what I'm doing. I usually, if I'm doing a ritual and I'm making an altar for ritual, then all of the elements are on the altar, and so is the representation of goddess and God and spirit and connection. All of those things would be on the altar if I was doing a ritual, for a group of people, or a full-on ritual. for any sort of purpose. If I'm working just for myself, I may have a much more sparse altar. Depends on what I'm working with. Certainly, if I was doing something like divination, as like doing card readings on my altar, I would have objects that represent water, because water is ancient wisdom and knowing, and it helps facilitate with that. It helps with vision and that sort of thing. So different tools can facilitate in different ways. So it depends on what you're making the altar for and what you plan to do with it. And that means that your altar needs to be changing all the time, depending upon how often you're using it. I use my altar quite a lot, so it changes a lot. This is my working altar, and then I have all kinds of flat surfaces in my house covered with gods and goddesses and rocks and crystals and antlers and everything else, because that's just how I do my life. So it's just me. But yeah, so wand can be air or fire depending upon your orientation to it. And then the athame, which is the ritual blade. Now, there's another difference between me and some of the folks that I have worked with and read. A lot of people say that, the athame should not be used for anything physical, that it should only be used for magical working, like drawing a circle, which you could use this for drawing energy, or, creating a pentacle to protect a space. It's very, very good for that sort of thing. But I do sometimes use it if I'm cutting something magical that I want to have, like a cord, for example, that I want to cut for a magical purpose. I would use it for that. But some witches I know use their kitchen knives for their athames, for their ritual blades. And some of the British tradition, you would use something like a separate, like a bowline, which is a little ritual knife that's used for cutting, like cutting herbs and inscribing candles and things like that. I do have one. It's actually hanging right above my altar right now. But I don't really use it as often. I use it more as a travel knife, like when I'm going to a magical event and I want to have a magical blade with me. I have it as a necklace, so I wear it, and then I don't have to worry about hauling this heavy thing around. My magical tools mostly were either given to me or made for me, and that's the old tradition says that's how it should be. If you buy them for yourself, you should not haggle over price. You may get them for 50 cents and be stunned. Someone also might ask you for $50, and if you think that is a thing you need, then the idea is that you just bite the bullet and do that. I've always have had so many magical friends in my lives over the last 30 years, over my lives, many lives. I've had lots of magical friends, and they have made beautiful things for me. And so my friend Bob the Fireman made this for me, and because it was made for me by Bob the Fireman, it definitely represents fire. So I have that. So I have air and water and fire. And then I also have representations of earth. Now, the traditional representation of earth would be a pentacle. And a pentacle can be, made out of wax, or could be made out of wood. I have a couple around the house that I have a place to put a candle, that sort of thing. But I'm an earth sign, as I said before, being a Taurus. I need rocks on my altar. That's my thing. So I have a fair number of rocks. I have this beautiful rock, which is a piece of amethyst. And amethyst makes me feel good. It actually is really good for your brain and your muscles and things. So I have some rocks to represent earth. I also have this fabulous geode. It's getting dusty. I love this geode, and I've had this on my altar for a long, long time. And the reason I have it on here is because it kind of reminds me of earth, but also because it has something inside of it that you can't see. There's it's like a prize, in a cereal box or something. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a crystal in there. And so I've never cut it because it's kind of cool that there's a crystal in there, and it's like hidden magic to me. And, and it's a piece of rock, it's dirt, and earth. And so it's on my altar to represent that. Now, if you like to, if you want to, you can really use any kind of things to represent those elements for yourself, but it's important to have all of those on there. I also use this for a wand, and this was gifted to me by a lovely man who has just passed away from this earth into the lap of the goddess, and that is Grandpa Witch. And this has so much of him in it that it just, I have to have it on my altar. And there are times when I use it as a wand because, well, look at it. It's magical and amazing, and it's part of the connection that I had with him. He was the high priest of a coven I was in for 7 years, that he and I were the priest and priestess that held the circle. So we shared a really profound magical energy, and I'm reminded of that profoundness when I hold this. So it's on my altar. And then other things that you might want to have on your altar. You could have things that represent certain energies that you like. For example, I have an elk's tooth, but I also have downstairs on my coffee table, which is also, basically an altar, I have elk's horns, because we have here in the area where I live, we have elk that go across the field here behind my bedroom. So I see them often in the morning. And sometimes at night, and we just finished the rut, so there was a lot of crazy and a lot of boys fighting and a lot of antler action. So I'm really excited about that, because it means I can add to my antler collection, and those will definitely be going on my altar, because elk, And then I also have this bear claw that was given to me by someone very special to me. I was given a long time ago. Bear is one of my totem animals, and he had bought if you can believe this, a bearskin rug at a thrift store, and it still had the claws, and so he didn't want to use it as a rug, because the bear is so magical. So he removed all the claws, and he put some of them on his altar and made necklaces into some of them, gave me one. And having a piece of bear, having something that, in my opinion, that was so disrespectful, turned into something so sacred and so beautiful. To have that energy of connection of bear on my altar is really special. So your altar is really a place where you're going to be working on stuff. It's a place where you could inscribe your candles with magical symbols to move energy in a particular way, if you want to create wealth or love or whatever you want to do. Now, one thing that I do want to say, because I said love, so I want to stop a moment and say, it's okay to ask for love. It's not okay to ask someone specific for it. It's not okay to intervene in someone else's will. When you ask for love or money, you should always, or anything, it should always be a neutral ask. It should not be, I would like this person to do this, because when you do that, you interfere with their karma and their path, the path that they came here to do. You're taking some of their power away, and that's just not right. That's not right. And so later on, we'll have a broadcast on ethics, and I think that's going to be really important, probably in the next one or two, just to get an idea of what I mean by that. Like, what do I mean when I say magical ethics? Because a lot of people don't really understand that, but it's really, your altar space is your space. It's your energetic space, where you can create the magic that you want to create, where you can ask for things, where you can leave offerings, where you can speak to the divine and connect with it, where you can use your divination tools, any of that stuff. And so your altar should really be a reflection of your magic. And, as I said, there is a place for some of that formula altar building and altar magic, but I would say that that's really only for larger rituals, I think, at least for me anyway. I know that certain people are wanting to see an altar look a particular way, and that maybe moves their psyche or moves their magic more than the shamanic sort of approach that I take. But I think that for me, the shamanic approach is what works for me. I consider myself to be a very eclectic Celtic dirt witch, pretty much. That's pretty much my orientation. So I hope that was helpful. And I still have some, about 6 or 7 minutes. So I want to see if you guys have questions about any of the stuff about altars and altar building and altar use, magical tools, anything like that. I'd be happy to answer any questions that have to do with any of that. I always have a candle, although I don't generally have a whole bunch of candles, just because I'm one of those people who forgets and leaves them lit, and I'm going to burn down my house if I do that. So I have very safe candles. You can see I have a candle here on the altar right now, but it's contained, because I'm one of those people that catches myself on fire fairly regularly. I think it's the Aries ascendant that I have. It just kind of leaps onto me and tries to become part of me. So So yeah, altar building, altar, what's on the altar, what, you know, what you use has to do with what you want to do in relation to magic. If you build an altar that, you know, is a formula altar and it doesn't move you, then why are you doing it, you know? Do what works for you. Put on the altar what works for you. I have some crazy things, you know. I also have my, you know, so I have like an incense censer. That's another thing. So I've got that here. I got this fabulous little incense censer for like $1 on Wish, which is pretty cool, and I really like it. It's got some cool symbolism. It's, you know, got a nice color to it, and it holds my incense, whether I have cones or sticks or whatever. Incense also represents air, of course, so you would have that. Salt can represent earth. Water, of course, can represent water. I mean, there's lots of different options. Herbs can represent air. They can also represent whatever their energies are, so you can put them on the altar also. You'll also find that if you have a cat, they'll often be in your lap or, you know, next to you when you're doing stuff with your altar, because cats are very sensitive, and some dogs as well are very sensitive. I've had dogs that are super sensitive to magic, and other dogs that are just kind of like, oh. So it really depends. I think cats kind of live in between worlds, and so they feel it when that doorway opens, you know. So, is there any questions from last time, or any questions on any of the tools? You guys have any questions about any of the stuff I talked about last time in relation to protection and smudging and that sort of stuff? I did get one question earlier, but I haven't seen any other ones. And I don't think I've had any questions on any of the altar stuff. So, okay, here's a question. Once you have completed the ritual, do you need to dismantle the altar, or do you leave it in place, trying to figure out working with energies? It depends. For example, if I'm doing some big magic thing where for example, I've had cause twice in my life to do banishing and or you know, blocking type of rituals where stopping someone from hurting me. And it really depends on what the situation is. And there's a lot that goes with that. Like one of the things that I did one time is I had someone who was really trying to harm me, and I made an altar out by the river, and I took a whole bunch of pictures of myself with that person, and I burned them, and I made a grave, and I put things in the grave, and I buried all the things in the hole, ashes mostly and rocks, and then I put, you know, some spell magic over top of that was binding, and then I left it there. So, but you know, something like that, if you did that in your home, you would probably want to clear that out afterwards. I always have altars that are set up to some degree all the time, and mainly because I pull a card every morning, and you know, I light a candle almost every day. So if you're working with magic daily, then it's good to have a dedicated working space. And one of the things that you might want to consider too is like having a spot out of the way means that you can leave your stuff out all the time. It depends on who's in your house too. I mean, if you have people in your house who are going to be touching your stuff and picking your stuff up and doing crazy stuff with your stuff on your altar, then you might want to put it all away. And I have done that, but my main altar is in my bedroom. So, you know, anybody who's going to be coming in my bedroom is going to be somebody who's supposed to be in there. But the spot that I chose, I'm going to show you, is a spot that has a wonderful view of nature all the way around. You can see my batlets there. And so this is my magic space, and I get to have this little corner, and it's where I do my ritual, and so I don't need to dismantle it when I'm done. I just leave it here. I'll clean away anything specific that I need to. Like I might take a spell that I've done and put it inside my magical cabinet, or put it inside a box so it can do its stuff, and it doesn't have to be out in the open where someone might touch it. But it depends on what you're doing. My thames, my chalices, my smudging tools, my wands are always out where I can get to them easily. So I hope that answered that question. Was there any other questions that anybody wanted to ask? We still have another minute or two before I sign off. Anything else about stuff with altars, stuff on altars, altar purposes, functions, that sort of stuff? Well, I hope that the broadcast is helpful and that you enjoyed it. And you're certainly welcome to ask questions in the comments area after the video is posted on the Blue Moon site, and I will let you know what the next broadcast will be as soon as I figure it out. But I have a pretty big list now, so I can choose from that, and I'll post it. One last question: what is your favorite piece to put on the altar? Oh my! Well, my favorite piece to put on the altar is actually a ritual chalice that I have. It was made for me by a lovely ceramics artist by the name of Stephanie Goff, and she has a company called Awe Dog, and she has a line she calls Naughty Wear, Knotty, naughty. And I have this chalice that looks like a grove of trees, with the bowl of the chalice is the tree tops. And it's one of the most beautiful and powerful pieces I have in my collection, and I use it always for group rituals. It's so huge, though, I don't generally use it for on my personal altar. I have my kitty coming to see me. See? There he is. That's Tucker. Hello. Say hello, Tucker. It's my magic boy. So that would be my favorite piece. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will do another broadcast next Wednesday. Probably either something on ethics or something fun. I haven't decided how I feel about it yet, but love you all. Thank you so much for signing in, and I will see you next week.